Hey, this is Warren Redlick. We're going to talk about eVTOL. This is a concept of what Tesla might build as an electric vertical takeoff and landing jet airplane that would take people from places to places at lower cost and higher speed and more efficiency than current airplanes. And I say, this is not going to happen. It's a cool idea, but it's not going to work from a business perspective. And I'm going to explain why. Are you ready? Let's go. For starters, let's hear from Jordan Giesecke, who appeared on Farzad Mesbahi's channel. They were talking about eVTOL. Listen to this first.
It depends on what your expectations of the VTOL are. If you're looking for something local or regional, then I think we're like Tesla has the ability to do something like that right
Ooh.
now. It's when you get into long range, it's different. But my viewpoint was that Tesla should start developing a VTOL in the mid 2020s, and it's going to take a long time to get it through all the regulatory hurdles, and then we might see like a release in the early 2030s.
So here's the problem. First of all, I love Jordan. I love Farzad. I think this is a great channel. Check out this video. There's a 2 hour long conversation about all kinds of things related to Tesla. But here's the problem. If you're going out to the mid 2030s, by that point in time, the Boring Company has bored tunnels, 100,000 miles of tunnels across all major cities in the wealthy world and large parts of the rest of the world. They've done tunnels between cities. You're going to have tunnels that are basically tunnels that are going to take you pretty much anywhere. You're going to have robo taxis that are going to take you 150 miles an hour on surface roads or in tunnels. So for short trips that he was talking about at the beginning, short local regional trips, you might not even need Hyperloop. It might be quick enough for you to just take a robo taxi going 150 miles an hour, and that would take you from Miami to Orlando in say 1 hour. For longer trips, let's say Miami to Atlanta, you would use Hyperloops. That'd be 800 miles an hour. I don't think eVTOL is going to be faster than 800 miles an hour anyway. And Boring Company Hyperloops are going to be less expensive on a cost basis per passenger mile compared to eVTOL. So, and then you get to this question of what about really long trips? Like you're going to go from Los Angeles to Shanghai. I believe we're going to have two different alternatives for Los Angeles to Shanghai for trips between the US and Asia and Europe. One alternative is going to be we're going to see boring tunnels under the Bering Strait. It goes up the west coast of the United States, under through Alaska, under the Bering Strait, through Russia, down into China. Yes, I know there's geopolitical issues. I can explain that if you want. Whenever I talk about boring the Bering Strait, people bring up, wait a minute, we'd have to deal with Putin, we'd have to deal with all these other issues. How is that going to work? And the answer is pretty simple. Plain and simple, Russia is a poor country, China is a rich country. If China wants to bore the Bering Strait, if they want these tunnels, they'll pay Putin off. It's not an issue for the United States. We think we're the big dog and we control everything in the world. The reality is that China is growing. China is really the biggest economy in the world. China is arguably running the US government, depending on who you talk to. I think by the time we got to boring the Bering Strait, let's say 10 years from now, hopefully whatever's going on with Russia will have calmed down. And if there's any concerns, the Chinese government is going to want this so badly because it's going to save them so much money. It's going to improve their exports. It's going to be better for them as well. That they'll take care of Putin. They'll Whoever's running Russia, they'll make a deal with them. They'll pay him off. There's going to be massive benefits to Russia to having this system in place. Really, what's going to bring the world together is making us everybody more economically interdependent, bringing everybody together, having more global trade, ending this absolute hatred we seem to have in the world for bashing everybody about trade. If we stop fighting with each other, we would be able to cooperate better. And I think the boring the Bering Strait, bringing all the countries together by trade in that way would basically help improve geopolitics and get us closer to world peace. Maybe, maybe I've been maybe I've been listening to too many John Lennon songs though. But let's get back into it. But that would be able to transport people in maybe 6 hours, maybe 10 hours at significantly lower cost than current cost of flying and lower cost than flying eVTOL. And if you want to go faster, SpaceX is going to have Starship going point to point, and it's going to make that trip in half an hour. So I don't see where the window is for eVTOL to come in. There's just not enough market space left. In short, the Boring Company is going to be able to provide transportation faster, cheaper, and more efficient and safer than flying. And then Starship will be able to cover really long haul flights, and you'll be able to do Hyperloop on long trips anyway using the Bering Loop. Using the Bering Strait Hyperloop, you'd be able to go to Europe on a spur. You'd be able to go to India. The Hyperloop will with boring tunnels will probably end up covering something like 80 or 90% of the world's population without heavy lifting. I'm not sure you can get to Australia. I think that's one of the big ones. There's probably a few other places like that where it might not be possible to do boring tunnels. So there'll be some room for some aviation, but it's just not that big. Now let's listen a little bit more about what Jordan has to say.
I think they're going to redo the entire airline industry to where you have point to point connections rather than hub and spoke. And it's going to
Good.
completely change. Like, all right, do we need all this security and all this other bullshit if we're just using these things like buses from point to point and they only carry like 10 people or something like that? Can we sidestep all those regulations and bring us back to a flying experience that's like, much less painful?
This is the other problem with using the air as a way from get to point A to point B is unfortunately we have this massive regulatory structure that's governed by the FAA in the United States and regulatory agencies in other countries that makes it difficult to operate an airline or an air travel service. So any eVTOL is going to have to comply with FAA regulations and the air regulations of any other country or whatever jurisdiction we're talking about. By contrast, there isn't a tunnel regulatory agency. So it may be that at some point we see some regulations come about to try to control what happens in the tunnels in the Hyperloop, but it's not really going to be necessary because the boring company is going to own it. The boring company is going to run it. It's going to self regulate. And if they do a good job, there won't be much need for regulation at all. So that pretty much solves that problem as well. And you think about it, flying, you have to fly in airspace that's controlled by government. You have to fly from one government run airport to another government run airport. With the boring company, you'll be traveling from one boring company station to another on a boring company tunnel. So the boring company pretty much runs it all. So I just don't see a space for EV to work. If you were able to get rid of all this federal regulatory stuff and all these government regulations on flying, maybe there'd be a better shot. You'd still have the issue that it'd be subject to weather. You'd still have the issue that it might not be faster than Hyperloop. You'd still have the issue that it probably wouldn't be as cost efficient on a passenger basis. So to me, eVTOL, if it comes about at all, ends up being a toy for billionaires or 100 millionaires who can spend $10 million on something. Unless you manufacture eVTOL at scale, it ends up being too costly for ordinary people to fly in and travel in. You need to really build a whole structure around this eVTOL system. And we're going to see that done with boring company tunnels and hyperloops anyway. So that's my take on it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please check out the t-shirts at elonbits.com. Tesla and Air t-shirts, one of the most popular t-shirts. Check out my other videos, including my video about boring the Bering Strait. Please consider supporting this channel on the Locals platform, on Patreon, or as a YouTube channel member. Links to all that in the description below. Like this video, share it with your friends. Please subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.